My mother was 92 years old. One morning, she vanished. My son looked me in the eye and told me, "She's resting at a friend's house." But his hands were trembling. And when I discovered the truth, I understood that my own son had locked her up, to steal everything from her. It wasn't a family matter anymore. It was a crime. If this story touches your soul, please subscribe. Every day I upload true stories that could be yours. Tell us where you are watching from. My name is Robert Guillermo Carcedo Benavides. I am 74 years old. And that morning, when I opened the door to my mother's room and saw the empty bed, I knew that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't intuition. It was certainty. Like when you know someone has died before the phone rings. The bed was perfectly made. Too perfect. My mother never made the bed like that. She always left the sheets wrinkled, the pillow crooked. "Why make it if I'm just going to lie down again?" she would say. But that morning, the sheets were stretched out like in a hotel, and her wheelchair was still there, empty, in the corner. Her medicine was intact. Her purse hung on the backrest. Everything was there, except for her. I left the room with my heart pounding in my chest. I went to the kitchen. My son, George German, was sitting at the table, drinking coffee, as if nothing was wrong. He looked up and smiled at me. That smile I knew, the same one he used as a boy when he broke something and hid it. "Morning, Dad," he said, calmly, too calmly. I grabbed the doorframe because I felt my legs giving out. "Where is your grandmother?" I asked him. My voice came out hoarse, almost breathless. George took another sip of coffee before answering. "She went with Aunt Rose, Rosanna, to spend a few days." I stared at him. "When?" He shrugged. "Last night, late. We didn't want to wake you up." Something about the way he said it didn't sound right. Like when someone tells a lie they practiced in front of the mirror. The words were too smooth, too rehearsed. "My mother doesn't leave without telling me," I said to him. George put the cup on the table with a dry thud. "Dad, she's an adult woman. She can leave whenever she wants." I felt my blood boil. "She's 92 years old, George, and she uses a wheelchair. How the hell did she leave without her chair?" He got up, walked to the sink, and rinsed his cup without looking at me. "Aunt Rose has a chair at her house. We already talked about it." But I saw his hand tremble. Just for a second. But I saw it. I walked over to the wall phone. That old device that Eva, insisted on keeping because cell phones run out of battery. I dialed Aunt Rose's number. 1, 2, 3 rings. No answer. I dialed again. Nothing. "She's not answering," I said to George, without taking my eyes off him. He put on his jacket and grabbed his car keys. "She must be busy, Dad. Or sleeping. You know she sleeps late." And he left. Just like that. Without saying goodbye. Without looking me in the eye. The door closed, and I was left alone in that enormous kitchen, the phone still in my hand. And then I started to tremble. Not from cold, from fear. Because deep down, I already knew. I already knew. I went back to my mother's room. I opened the closet. All her clothes were there. The dresses she wore to go out. Her sweaters. Her orthopedic shoes. Everything. I opened the nightstand drawer. Her rosary. Her reading glasses. The book she was reading. I opened her purse. Her ID. Her wallet with old photos. Her house keys. Everything was in its place, as if she had never left. But then, where was she? I sat on the bed and grabbed her pillow. It smelled like her perfume, that cheap perfume she bought at the drugstore. And for the first time in many years, I felt like crying. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Rage was still holding me up. I called my daughter, Grace, Graciela. She answered on the third ring. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked me. She always knew when something was wrong. "Your grandmother is gone," I told her. "George says she went with Aunt Rose, but something doesn't add up." There was silence. Then I heard Grace take a deep breath, as if preparing to say something she didn't want to say. "Dad, Aunt Rose is in the hospital. She's been there for almost a month. She had a bad fall." I felt the floor open up beneath me. "What?" My voice came out as a strangled cry. "I thought you knew, Dad. I told you 2 weeks ago." But I didn't remember. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to remember. I hung up without saying goodbye. And then yes. Then I cried. I got up and started searching. I opened drawers, closets. I looked through papers. I was looking for something, anything, that would tell me where my mother was. I found old bills, photos, letters from years ago, but nothing recent. Nothing that explained this nightmare. I went to the living room and saw the house phone. I dialed the hospital number. "St. Mary's Hospital, Hospital San Vicente," a female voice answered. "I need to speak with Rose Miller, Rosanna Benavides. She's my sister." The woman typed something on a computer. "Yes, Mrs. Miller is admitted here, but she cannot receive calls. She is in recovery." I squeezed the phone so hard I felt like I was going to break it. "Since when?" "3 weeks, sir." I hung up and I screamed. I screamed until my throat hurt. George returned that night. He came in with a bag of food and left it on the kitchen table. "I brought a rotisserie chicken, pollo asado," he said, as if nothing had happened. I was sitting on the couch, in the dark. I hadn't turned on the lights. I hadn't eaten. I had just been there, sitting, trying to understand. "I called the hospital," I told him, without looking up. George walked toward me slowly. "Aunt Rose has been admitted for 3 weeks." George left the bag on the table. "Dad, you're confused." I moved closer. We were face to face. "Where is my mother?" He looked at me without blinking. "I told you. She's with your aunt." "Don't lie to me." My scream filled the house. George took a step back. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Not fear, but calculation. As if he were measuring how much he could tell me, how much he could keep lying. "Dad, calm down," he said, raising his hands. "You're upset. Sit down. Let's talk." But I didn't want to talk. I wanted answers. "Where is she?" I repeated. George sighed, as if I were a bothersome child. "It's fine, Dad. I swear. She just needs to rest for a few days. Away from here." I felt something break inside me. It wasn't just the lie. It was the way he told it. As if I were an idiot. As if it didn't matter. "Get out of my house," I told him. George blinked. "What?" "Get out now!" George looked at me for a long time. Then he grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around. "Dad, you're not thinking straight. We'll talk tomorrow when you're calmer." And he left. The door closed softly, almost silently, and I was left standing there in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. My son had lied to me. My mother was gone, and I had no idea what to do. I sat on the couch and looked at the empty wheelchair, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own son. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed sitting on the couch, the lights off, staring at the closed door of my mother's room. I thought about Eve. She always defended George. Always. When I told her that our son had something dark inside him, she would silence me. "He's your firstborn, Robert. Don't be unfair." And I listened to her. I always listened to her. But Eve was no longer here, and neither was my mother. I got up at sunrise without having closed my eyes once. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. My hands were trembling so much that I spilled the water, and as I cleaned up the mess, I swore something to myself. I was going to find her, no matter what I had to do. I was going to find my mother, even if it meant destroying my own son. There was a Sunday, 2 years ago, when this house was still alive. It was my mother's 90th birthday. Eve got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and started cooking. I watched her from the bed, putting on the pink apron she only used for special occasions. "Go back to sleep," she said, smiling. But I got up too, because I liked seeing her like that, happy, busy. When I went down to the kitchen, the smell of freshly baked biscuits, pan recién horneado, already filled the house. My mother was sitting in her chair, peeling potatoes next to Eve. They were both laughing about something I didn't understand. "What are you two laughing about?" I asked them. My mother looked at me with those still bright eyes. "Woman talk, my son. You wouldn't understand." And they kept laughing. At 11 o'clock in the morning, they started arriving. First George, with Sophia, and the children. Beatrice ran in and hung around my mother's neck. "Great-grandma, happy birthday." Benjamin brought a drawing he had made at school, a drawing of all of us, with bright colours and exaggerated smiles. My mother taped it to the refrigerator with a magnet. "It's the prettiest thing I've ever seen," she said, kissing the boy's forehead. Then Gabriel, arrived with his wife. They came in quietly, as always, but they brought flowers. Grace showed up half an hour later, carrying a huge cake that almost didn't fit through the door. And Giovanni called from the United Kingdom, Italia, his face pixelated on the cell phone, singing "Happy Birthday" with a strange accent that made us all laugh. The table was full. Heads, plates, glasses, food, hands grabbing bread, voices overlapping. Eve was serving the pot roast, estofado, and my mother was telling her, "Don't give me so much, Eve, or I won't be able to finish it." But Eve filled her plate anyway. George was at the head of the table, telling Ethan about a new business he was setting up. "This time it's going to work," he said, with that confidence he always had. Sophia watched him in silence, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I watched them from my chair, and at that moment, with the house full of noise and life, I thought, this is happiness. I didn't know it was the last time we would all be together like that. After eating, George got up to give a toast. He raised his wine glass, and we all fell silent. "To Grandma," he said, "the strongest woman I know. She raised all of us, and now she takes care of us from her chair, with that wisdom only age can bring." We all applauded. My mother's eyes were moist. Eve squeezed her hand. But I saw something strange. I saw how George looked around the house as he spoke, as if he was evaluating, calculating, measuring the value of things. Sophia noticed it too. She got up from the table and went out to the backyard. I followed her. "Are you okay?" I asked her. She looked at me with tired eyes. "Mr. Robert, your son is changing, and I don't know if it's for the better." But I didn't want to listen to her. 6 months later, Sophia left. She took Beatrice and Benjamin. George showed up at home one Saturday morning with red eyes and wrinkled clothes. "She left," he told me, sitting down in the kitchen. "She said she can't stand me anymore, that I'm a failure." Eve hugged him. "You're not a failure, my son. You're just going through a difficult time. But I didn't say anything, because I knew Sophia was right. George was changing. Every business he set up failed. Every promise he made was broken. And every time he came home, he was angrier, more desperate. My mother looked at me from her chair. "Robert, help him," she told me. And I, as always, nodded. 1 year later, Eve started feeling sick. At first, it was just tiredness. "It's my age," she would say, dismissing it. But then she started coughing, a dry, deep cough that woke her up at night. I took her to the doctor. They sent us for tests. I waited in the waiting room while they took x-rays. When she came out, her face was pale. "What did they tell you?" I asked her. She grabbed my hand. "Nothing yet. We have to wait for the results." But I saw the fear in her eyes, that fear that can't be hidden. A week later, the doctor called us. "You need to come in. We need to talk." And I knew. Before getting to the office, I already knew. "It's pneumonia," the doctor told us, looking at the x-rays against the light. "But it's complicated. At her age, we have to be very careful." Eve squeezed my hand hard. The doctor kept talking, using words I didn't understand. Antibiotics, oxygen, monitoring. But I only heard the buzzing in my ears. They admitted her that same afternoon. I stayed with her. I slept in a chair next to her bed, or tried to sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I heard her cough. My mother came every day. She sat on the other side of the bed and held Eve's hand. "You have to get out of here, honey," she would tell her. "This family needs you." But Eve grew weaker every day. I called the children. Grace arrived the next day. She took a week off work and stayed at the hospital with us. John flew from the United Kingdom. Ethan came after his shift. But George always had an excuse. "Dad, I have an important meeting. I'll go tomorrow." The next day, "The traffic is impossible. I'll stop by tonight." And at night, "The kids need me. Tomorrow for sure." Eve waited for him. Every time the room door opened, she looked up, hoping to see him. And every time it wasn't him, her face dimmed a little more. One afternoon, with her voice barely audible, she told me, "Don't be hard on him, Robert. George has a lot of pressure." I thought it was kindness, but it wasn't. Eve died on a Thursday. I was reading the newspaper to her. I read her the news every day, even though she could barely respond anymore. I was in the sports section when I noticed she had stopped breathing, just like that. Suddenly, without warning, her hand, which was holding mine, went limp. "Eve," I said. Nothing. "Eve?" I touched her face. It was cold. I called the nurses. They came running, but there was nothing more to be done. I stood there, next to the bed, looking at her motionless body. 52 years past there, and she was gone just like that, in silence, just like she was. I called the children. Grace was in the cafeteria. She came up crying. John took a taxi straight from the airport. Ethan arrived in an hour. George answered the phone on the 5th ring. "Dad, I'm busy." "Your mother died," I told him. There was silence. "I'm on my way." He arrived the next day, at the funeral, with a wrinkled black suit and an unshaven face. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, hugging me quickly. "I heard late. But I had called 3 times. I had left him messages. During the burial, his phone didn't stop ringing. I saw him answer twice, moving away from the group, speaking softly. When we threw dirt on the casket, George wasn't even crying. He just looked at his phone. My mother was next to me, leaning on her cane. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "You don't have to do it." I didn't say anything, because I didn't know what to say, because deep down, a part of me was already starting to understand who my son really was. After the funeral, the house emptied. Everyone left, and I was left alone with my mother. We sat in the living room, not talking, looking at the photos of Eve on the wall. "Robert," she said, after a long time, "now it's just you and me, but we're going to be okay." I nodded, but I didn't believe her, because nothing was going to be okay anymore. The first few months, we tried to keep the routine. I cooked, she helped me peel vegetables. We watched television together at night. But the house was too big, too silent. And then George started coming over. "Dad, I came to help you," he would say. He brought food, stayed for dinner, offered to fix things. And I, the idiot, opened the door to him, because I thought maybe Eve was right. Maybe he just needed time. But I was wrong. And when I realized it, it was already too late. 2 weeks after the funeral, George knocked on the door one Sunday morning. He brought a woman. "Dad, I want you to meet Tiffany, Fabiana," he said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. She was young, maybe 35 years old, thin, with dyed blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wore tight jeans and high heels, as if she were going to a party and not visiting an old man in mourning. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Robert," she said, extending her hand. She had long nails, painted red. When I shook her hand, she squeezed hard, too hard. My mother was in the living room, sitting in her chair. Tiffany approached and spoke to her as if she were a child. "Hello, Grandma, how are you?" My mother looked her up and down and didn't say anything. She just nodded. Tiffany started coming every week, always with George, always with some comment about the house. "This kitchen is very old-fashioned, isn't it?" she would say, running her finger over the countertop as if looking for dust. "You should really modernize it." "Oh, the bathroom needs renovating. The ceiling could fall in." My mother looked at her suspiciously. One afternoon, when George and Tiffany left, my mother grabbed my arm. "That woman has snake eyes," she told me. "I don't like her." I laughed. I tried to play it down. "She's just George's girlfriend, Mum. Let's not worry about it." But my mother wasn't laughing. "Robert, listen to me. That woman didn't come here for love. She came for something else." I should have listened to her. But I didn't. One Wednesday afternoon, George arrived with a briefcase. He put it on the kitchen table and pulled out some papers. "Dad, I need Grandma to sign this," he told me, showing me documents full of small print. I took the papers and tried to read them, but I didn't understand anything. "What is this?" I asked. George ran his hand through his hair impatiently. "It's to renew the house insurance. Routine. I just need her signature." I called my mother. She came slowly, shuffling her feet. "What's wrong, my son?" she asked me. George handed her a pen. "Grandma, just sign here. It's for the insurance, so you're protected." My mother looked at the papers. Then she looked at me. "Is it important?" she asked. I nodded, because I trusted my son, and that was my mistake. My mother signed. She scribbled her name on the bottom line with a trembling hand. George quickly folded the papers and put them in the briefcase. "Perfect. Thank you, Grandma." He left without having coffee, without staying to chat. My mother remained seated, looking at the empty table. "Robert," she said after a while, "I signed because you told me it was okay, but I don't know what I signed." I felt a knot in my stomach. I should have asked him to let me read them calmly. I should have called a lawyer, but I didn't, because he was my son, and sons don't deceive their parents, or so I thought. A week later, Lucia didn't come. Lucy was the nurse who took care of my mother 3 times a week. She bathed her, gave her medicine, helped her get dressed. My mother loved her. Lucy treats me like a person, not like an old lady, she would say. But that Monday, Lucy didn't show up. I called her cell phone. "Mr. Robert," she said, her voice choked, as if she had been crying. "Your son told me they didn't need me anymore. He paid me and asked me not to come back." I felt my blood run cold. "George told you that?" "Yes, sir. He said he was going to take care of things. I'm very sorry. Your mum is a very nice lady." And she hung up. I was left holding the phone, feeling rage rise in my throat. That night, when George came over, I confronted him. "Why did you fire Lucy?" I asked him. He was putting some things in the refrigerator. He didn't even turn around. "Because we don't need her anymore, Dad. I can take care of Grandma." I walked closer. "You don't live here, George. How are you going to take care of her?" He slammed the refrigerator door shut and looked at me. That cold look that reminded me of the boy who sold the dog without permission. "Dad, we're spending money unnecessarily. Lucy charged too much. I can come more often. Or we can look for another solution." Another solution? Those words hung in the air, but I didn't ask what they meant. I was afraid of the answer. Ethan started coming over too, but he didn't come to visit me. He came to talk to George. They would lock themselves in the backyard, talking softly. I watched them from the kitchen window. George would point at the house. Ethan would nod. One afternoon I went out to the backyard. "What are you talking about?" I asked them. They both turned around quickly, as if I had caught them doing something wrong. "Nothing, Dad," Ethan said, avoiding looking me in the eye. "Just work stuff." But George looked at me directly. "We're seeing how to help you, Dad. This house is too big for you and Grandma. Maybe you should think about something smaller." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "You want me to sell the house?" George shook his head, but his smile said otherwise. My mother started to change. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She no longer talked to me like before. One night, as we were having dinner, she looked at me with sad eyes. "Robert," she said to me, "your son treats me like I'm stupid." I put down my fork. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "He talks to me as if I don't understand anything. And Tiffany, that woman asks me strange questions." "What kind of questions?" "About papers, about property, about what I have saved." I felt a chill. "And what did you tell her?" My mother looked at me intently. "Nothing, because it's none of her business." But I saw the fear in her eyes, and I did nothing. I did nothing because I didn't want to believe that my son was capable of that. Grace called one Saturday. "Dad, how are you doing?" she asked me. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her that George had fired Lucy, that he was bringing papers to sign, that something was wrong. But I didn't. "We're fine, honey," I told her. "Don't worry." Why did I lie? Because I didn't want to worry her. Because I thought I could handle the situation. Because I still had hope that everything was a misunderstanding. "And Grandma?" Grace asked. I looked at my mother, sitting in her chair, her gaze lost on the television. "She's fine," I lied. "She sends her love." When I hung up, my mother looked at me. "You didn't tell her anything?" I shook my head. "I don't want to worry her." My mother sighed. "Shouldn't you? Because I feel like something bad is going to happen." Tiffany and George came one day with a caretaker, a large man with a full beard and small eyes. "Dad, this is Tony, Gonzalo." George said. He's going to come help you with Grandma in case you need anything. I looked at the man. Tony didn't shake my hand. He just nodded. We don't need anyone, I told George, but he ignored me. It's just for safety, Dad. It doesn't cost anything. Tony stayed all afternoon, sitting in the living room, not talking, just watching. My mother was uncomfortable. Robert, I don't like that man, she whispered to me. Me neither, Mum. But when I asked George to take him away, he got angry. Dad, I'm trying to help you, but you don't seem to want help. And he left, leaving Tony sitting in my living room like a guard dog. That night, after Tony finally left, my mother called me to her room. She was sitting on the bed, holding her rosary. Robert, I need to tell you something, she said to me. Her voice was trembling. Your son is scaring me. I sat next to her. What happened? She took a deep breath. He asked me about Uncle Stephen's Esteban property, about the inheritance, about where I keep the papers. I felt my stomach turn. And what did you tell him? Nothing. I told him I didn't remember. But I do remember, Robert. I remember everything. She grabbed my hand tightly. Promise me you won't let him take anything. I nodded, but inside I felt like I had already lost control. My son wasn't helping. He was hunting, and I had been so blind that I didn't see it until it was too late. I decided to make a big dinner, like Eve used to. Every Sunday, she gathered the family. Food, laughter, silly arguments about football, or politics. I thought maybe if we went back to those traditions, things would get better. I called everyone. Grace couldn't come. She was working. John was still abroad. But George and Ethan said yes. Invite Father Andrew and Selmo, my mother suggested. Andrew was the neighborhood priest. He had known the family since my children were little. He was a good man, wise. I thought his presence would bring peace. So I called him. With pleasure, Robert, he told me. I spent all Saturday morning cooking. I made pot roast, estofado, like Eve used to, but it didn't taste the same. On Sunday, everyone arrived at noon. George came with Tiffany, Ethan with his wife, Eleanor. Father Andrew arrived on time, with a bottle of wine and that kind smile he always had. Robert, it's good to see you, he said, hugging me. The house smelled of food. I set the large dining room table, the one we only used for special occasions. My mother was sitting at the head, dressed up in her blue dress. She had combed her hair, put on perfume. You look beautiful, Mum, I told her. She smiled, but it was a sad smile, as if she knew something bad was going to happen. We all sat down. George on my right, Ethan across from me, Tiffany next to George, Father Andrew next to my mother. And we started eating. At first, everything was fine. We talked about the weather, football, the news. Father Andrew told a story from the parish that made us laugh. My mother ate slowly, listening in silence. But then George put his fork down on the plate. That metallic sound cut through the conversation. We all looked at him. We need to talk about something, he said, staring at me. I felt a knot form in my stomach. About what? I asked. George looked at Ethan. Ethan nodded. And then George dropped the bomb. Dad, we're worried about you. I frowned. Worried? Ethan leaned forward. Yes, Dad, you're getting older. Taking care of Grandma is a lot for you. I felt my face burn. I take perfectly good care of your grandmother, I said, trying to stay calm. But George shook his head. Dad, it's not a reproach. It's a reality. You're 74 years old. Mum needs professional care. Tiffany intervened, putting her hand on George's. Mr. Robert, we say this with love. We want what's best for Grandma. I looked at Father Andrew. He was uncomfortable, swirling the wine in his glass, not knowing where to look. My mother raised her voice. I don't need professional care. I am perfectly fine with my son. But George interrupted her. Grandma, you know we adore you, but you need 24-hour attention. Dad can't give you that. And then I felt something break inside me. Who told you I can't? I asked, raising my voice. George sighed, as if it pained him to have to explain something obvious to me. Dad, you fired Lucy. Grandma is without medical supervision. What if something happens to her and you're sleeping? What if she falls? Ethan nodded. It's true, Dad. You have to think about her. I looked at Ethan, my son, the one who had always been quieter, more obedient, and now he was on George's side. Grace agrees with us, Ethan said. We talked to her yesterday and she's worried too. I felt my blood boil. Grace didn't tell me anything. George smiled. Because she didn't want to hurt you. But we all think the same thing. At that moment, the cell phone on the table rang. It was Grace, calling on video chat. I answered. Her face appeared on the screen. Dad, what's going on? She asked. She looked confused. Did George talk to you yesterday? I asked her. She frowned. No, Dad. I haven't talked to George in 2 weeks. Why? I looked at George. He had lied. Again. But before I could say anything, the connection started to fail. Grace's image pixelated. Dad, I can't hear you, her voice said, brokenly, and it cut out. The call dropped. I called back. Nothing. I put the phone on the table and looked at George. Why did you lie? He shrugged. I didn't lie. Maybe I was confused. But his smile told me he knew exactly what he was doing. Father Andrew cleared his throat. Well, I think everyone here wants the best for Mrs. Gertrudis, he said, trying to calm things down. But I didn't want calm anymore. I wanted answers. What professional care are you talking about? I asked. George exchanged a look with Ethan. There's a really nice retirement community on the outskirts of New York City, Las Afueras, George said. With nurses, gardens, activities. Grandma would be happy. I got up from the table. My chair fell backward with a dry thud. You want to put your grandmother in a nursing home? George also stood up. It's not a nursing home, Dad. It's a high-quality community. Tiffany nodded. I know it. It's beautiful. My mother grabbed my arm. Robert, I'm not going anywhere. But her voice was trembling. She was scared. No one is taking my mother, I said, looking George in the eye. He took a step toward me. We were face to face. Father Andrew stood up, trying to mediate. Please, let's calm down, he said. But George wasn't calming down. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. We are all worried. Even Father Andrew can see it. Andrew raised his hands. I didn't say that, George. But George ignored him. If you don't want a community, then let me bring in a permanent caregiver. Tony can stay here. I shook my head. I don't want that man in my house. Ethan intervened. Dad, you're being stubborn. We just want to help. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't help. It was a plan. I left the dining room. I walked out to the backyard. I needed air. I needed to think. I heard someone following me. It was Father Andrew. Robert, he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? I shook my head. No, Father, I'm not okay. My son is trying to take my mother away from me. Andrew sighed. Maybe he truly believes he's helping. I looked at him. You too? The priest looked down. I'm just saying, well, maybe you should consider. He didn't finish the sentence because he saw something in my eyes, something that made him stop talking. I went back to the dining room. George, Ethan, Tiffany, and Ellen were talking softly. When I walked in, they fell silent. And then I heard it. A laugh. Tiffany's laugh. And in that moment, I knew something was wrong. I want all of you to leave, I said. My voice came out calmly, too calmly. George blinked. What? Leave. Now. Ethan stood up. Dad, don't be like this. We're just… Get out, I shouted. Father Andrew grabbed his jacket. I think it's best if I go, he said, uncomfortably. Ethan and his wife left without saying anything, but George stayed. He looked at me with that expression I knew so well, that mixture of contempt and pity. Dad, you're acting like a child, he told me. Tiffany touched his arm. Come on, honey. They'll talk when he's calmer. And they left. The door closed, and I was left standing there in the middle of the dining room, with the cold food on the table, and my mother crying silently in her chair. I felt invisible, as if I didn't matter anymore. That night, my mother didn't want dinner. She went to her room early. I cleaned the table, I put away the food, I washed the dishes, and while I did all that, I thought. I thought about how I had reached this point, about how my own son had humiliated me in my own house, in front of Father Andrew, in front of my mother. When I finished cleaning, I went to my mother's room. I knocked on the door. Mom? Silence. I opened it slowly. She was sitting on the bed, holding her rosary, looking out the window. Robert, she said without looking at me, your son has a plan, and we are in the middle of it. I sat next to her. I know, Mum. She grabbed my hand. Don't let him take me. I squeezed her hand. I won't allow it. I swear. But inside, I was afraid. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't know if I could keep that promise. If you are listening to my story, leave me a comment telling me where you are watching from. Knowing that someone is there gives me strength to keep telling it. The days after that dinner were strange. My mother no longer spoke to me like before. Before, when I entered her room in the mornings, she would smile at me. Good morning, my son, she would say, and ask me to tell her what we were going to do that day. But now, when I entered, she barely looked up. She stayed there, sitting in her chair, looking out the window as if I didn't exist. Mum, I would say, are you okay? She would nod without looking at me. Yes, I'm fine. But her voice was flat, empty, as if something had been taken from inside her. I tried to talk. I asked her if she wanted to go out to the backyard, if she wanted me to make her favorite tea. But she would just say, whatever you want, Robert, and go back to looking out the window. George came every day. Before, he came 2 or 3 times a week. Now it was every day. He arrived in the morning, locked himself in the room with my mother, and they talked softly. I tried to listen from the hallway, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. When George came out, he always had that smile. Grandma is fine, Dad, he would tell me. She's just a little tired. But when I went in afterward, my mother looked at me with scared eyes. One day I asked her, what does George tell you when he's alone with you? She looked down. Nothing, my son. He just asks me how I am. but I knew she was lying to me. I could see it in the way her hands were trembling. One afternoon, George arrived with Tiffany and Tony. The three of them came in without ringing the doorbell. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch. I heard their voices in the living room. I went out and saw them surrounding my mother. George was kneeling in front of her, talking softly. "Grandma, it's for your own good," he was saying. "Dad can't take care of you the way you should be. You know that." My mother looked at the floor. Tiffany stroked her shoulder. "We love you, Grandma. We just want what's best for you." Tony was standing next to the door, arms crossed like a bodyguard. I walked closer. "What is going on here?" George stood up. "Dad, we were just talking with Grandma." But my mother had tears in her eyes. "Leave her alone," I told them. My voice came out harder than I expected. Tiffany raised her hands. "Mr. Robert, we're just—" "Get out," I interrupted her. "The three of you now." George looked at me with that expression of contempt that hurt me so much. "Dad, you're getting paranoid." But they left, all three of them. When the door closed, I knelt in front of my mother. "What did they say to you?" I asked her. She shook her head. "Nothing, Robert. Nothing important." But her hands wouldn't stop trembling. I hugged her. I felt her small, fragile body trembling against mine. "Mum, you can tell me anything," I whispered to her. But she just cried silently, and I knew something terrible was happening. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed in the living room, sitting on the couch, with all the lights off. It was almost 3 o'clock in the morning when I heard a noise. It was coming from my mother's room. I got up slowly and walked down the hallway. Her door was ajar. I pushed it open gently. My mother was sitting on the bed, crying. "Mum?" I whispered. She looked up. Her eyes were red, swollen. "Robert," she said with a broken voice, "I can't sleep." I sat next to her. "Why are you crying?" She looked at me for a long time, as if she was deciding whether she could trust me. Finally, she spoke. "Your son told me something." I felt my heart race, my heart. "What did he tell you?" My mother lowered her voice, as if she was afraid someone would hear us. "He told me that you want to put me in a nursing home." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "What?" She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "He said you can't handle me anymore, that I'm being a burden, that it would be better for everyone if I went to a place where professionals would take care of me." I felt rage rise in my throat. "Mum, that's not true. I never said that. I never thought that." She looked at me with eyes full of doubt. "But George said that you didn't want to tell me to avoid hurting me. That's why he was arranging everything for you." And in that moment, I understood. George wasn't just taking my mother away from me, he was turning me into the enemy. "Mum, look at me," I told her, cupping her face in my hands. "George is lying to you. I will never, ever abandon you. You stay here with me until God decides." She looked at me intently. I saw how she struggled to believe me. "But he showed me papers," she whispered. "Papers for a residence. He said everything was already settled." I felt my hands trembling. "What papers?" She got up slowly, walked to her closet, and took out an envelope. She handed it to me with trembling hands. I opened it. Inside was a brochure for a geriatric residence and a letter. The letter said, "Dear Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Benavides, your family has requested a place for you. We look forward to receiving you next month." The letter was signed by the director and dated 2 weeks ago. I felt the room spin. "Mum, I didn't sign this. I didn't request any of this." She sat on the bed, defeated. George said you had done it for my own good, that it was for the best. I squeezed the paper so hard it wrinkled. He is manipulating you, and he is using me to do it. My mother started crying again. I don't know what to believe, Robert. I don't know who to believe. And those words destroyed me, because my own mother doubted me. After 74 years of life, after everything we had been through together, my son had managed to put a wall between us. I got up and walked toward the door. I needed to get out of there before she saw me cry. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed and let it all out. I cried like I hadn't cried since Eve's death. I cried for my mother, for her fear, for her confusion. I cried for myself, for feeling so helpless. I cried because my own son had turned me into the villain of this story. And the worst part was that I didn't know how to fix it. How do you prove to someone that the liars are the others? How do you rebuild trust when someone has planted so much doubt? I stayed sitting there in the dark, my hands covering my face, feeling everything slipping through my fingers. And for the first time in my life, I thought about giving up. I thought about letting George do whatever he wanted. Because maybe he was right. Maybe I couldn't do it anymore. But then I remembered something. I remembered the day my mother was born. No, wait, I wasn't there. But my grandmother told me that story. She told me how my mother came into the world in the middle of a storm, in a house without electricity, with a midwife who almost didn't arrive on time. My grandmother said that when my mother was born, she cried so loud that she could be heard all down the street. That child came into this world fighting, my grandmother told me, and that's how she will live her whole life, fighting. And my mother had fought. She had raised 4 children almost alone while my father worked from dawn to dusk. She had survived the death of her husband, her brothers, her friends. She had survived 92 years of life. And me, I was going to give up because my son was a liar. No, I couldn't. I got up, washed my face with cold water, and went back to my mother's room. She was still sitting on the bed, looking at the floor. I knelt in front of her. "Mum, listen to me closely," I told her. "I don't know how to convince you that I'm telling you the truth, but I swear on Eve's memory, on everything we've lived through together, that I will never abandon you. George is lying. He is manipulating you, and I'm going to prove it to you." She looked up. I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "How?" I didn't have an answer, but in that moment it didn't matter. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm going to do it, I promise you." She reached out her hand and touched my cheek. "Robert, I'm scared." I grabbed her hand. "Me too, Mum. Me too." And that was the longest night of my life, because I knew it wasn't just about taking care of her anymore. It was about saving her. That very night, after I went to my room, my mother stayed awake. I know because at 4 o'clock in the morning, I went downstairs for water and I heard her. She was in her room, talking to herself. "Eve," she was saying with a trembling voice, "Eve, if you're watching me from where you are, protect Robert, because I feel like something bad is coming. Your son George has the eyes of someone who has already decided something terrible. And I don't know if I'll be able to protect myself." There was silence. Then she continued, "If something happens to me, Eve, I want you to know that Robert did everything right. He took care of me. He loved me. And if your other son harms me, I don't want Robert to carry that guilt. Tell him I forgive him. Tell him I will always forgive him." I froze in the hallway, tears falling uncontrollably, and I didn't go in, because I knew that if I went in, she would stop talking. And she needed to say that. She needed to get it off her chest. If you're listening to this and something similar has happened to you, you're not alone. And if you're still here, subscribe, because what's coming will hurt even more. 2 days after that night, I woke up and went straight to my mother's room, like every day. But this time, when I opened the door, I already knew. I already felt it. The bed was made, the chair was empty, and although I had seen it before, although I already knew what it meant, I felt the same blow to the chest. But this time it was different. This time I didn't stay paralyzed. I ran to the kitchen. George was there, drinking coffee as if nothing was wrong. "Where is she?" I asked him. He looked at me with that rehearsed calm. "I already told you, Dad. She's with Aunt Rose." But I didn't believe him anymore. I didn't believe anything that came out of his mouth anymore. I grabbed my jacket. "I'm going to the police," I told him. George got up quickly. "Dad, don't do that. You'll look crazy." I didn't go to the police, not yet, because a part of me, however small, still doubted. He was my son, my firstborn, the one I had carried in my arms when he was a baby, the one I had taught to ride a bike. How could I report him? I decided to investigate first. I needed proof. I went to Ethan's house. He lived in a distant neighborhood, in a small house with bars on the windows. I rang the doorbell. His wife, Ellen, opened it. "Mr. Robert," she said, surprised. "Ethan's not here." I gently pushed the door open. "I need to talk to him. It's urgent." Ellen hesitated, but let me in. Ethan was in the living room watching television. When he saw me, his face turned pale. "Dad," he said, getting up. "What are you doing here?" "Where is your grandmother?" I asked him directly. Ethan looked at Ellen. She left the room uncomfortably. Ethan ran his hand through his hair. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." I walked closer. "Ethan, you're my son, and I know when you're lying to me. Where is George keeping her?" Ethan took a step back. "Dad, His voice broke. "I just did what he asked me. He said it was for everyone's good." I felt my blood boil. "What did you do?" Ethan sat on the couch, his head in his hands. "I helped him take her, but he told me it was only going to be for a few days, that he just needed her to sign some papers, and then he would bring her back." I sat next to him. "Where did they take her?" Ethan looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "I don't know, Dad. I swear. George didn't tell me. He just asked me to help him get her out of the house. And I did it." I grabbed his arm. "Ethan, your grandmother is in danger. I need you to tell me everything you know." He took a deep breath. "I know that Tiffany and Tony are with him, and I know they have a house somewhere. I heard George talking on the phone. He said something about the house on the outskirts, but I don't know where it is." I got up. "Anything else?" Ethan shook his head. "I'm sorry, Dad. Sorry for everything." I looked at him. My son, my Ethan, the one who had always been weak, the one who always followed others. "You'll have to live with this," I told him. And I left his house without looking back. I returned to my house. I went straight to the study. That's where we kept the security camera recordings, cameras that George had installed a year ago. "For security," he had said. I turned on the computer. I looked for the day my mother disappeared. I found the folder, but when I tried to open it, there was nothing. The files had been erased. All of them. I felt my hands tremble. George had deleted the evidence. But then I remembered something. Mr. Teodoro, my neighbor across the street, had cameras. cameras that pointed toward the street. I ran out of the house. I crossed the street. I knocked on Theodore's house. He opened it, surprised to see me so agitated. "Robert, what happened?" "Theodore, I need to see your cameras," I told him, almost out of breath. "My mother disappeared." Mr. Theodore let me in. We went to his study. He turned on his computer. "What day was it?" he asked me. I gave him the date. He searched his files. "Here it is," he said, opening the video. We sat in front of the screen. I saw my house, the empty street. It was 11 o'clock at night, according to the clock in the corner of the video. And then it appeared. A black van. It stopped in front of my house. The passenger door opened, and George got out, then Tiffany, and then Tony. The three of them walked toward my door. They disappeared from the frame. We waited. 5 minutes later, they reappeared. George and Tony were carrying something. A wheelchair, with my mother sitting in it. Her head was bowed. She wasn't moving. They put her in the van, and they drove away. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Mr. Theodore put a hand on my shoulder. "Robert, what is going on?" I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen. My son. My own son. He had taken my mother out of her house in the middle of the night, like a thief, like a criminal. "I need a copy of this," I told Theodore with a trembling voice. He nodded. He recorded the video onto a USB drive and handed it to me. "Go to the police," he told me. "Now?" I grabbed the drive with trembling hands. I left his house. But I didn't go straight to the police. I went home first. I needed to think. I needed to process what I had just seen. I sat in the living room with the USB drive in my hand, and then I fell to my knees. And I screamed. I screamed until my throat hurt. I called Grace. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, what happened?" I didn't even know where to start. "Your brother took your grandmother," I told her. The dinner, the manipulation, the papers, the lies, and finally the video. When I finished, Grace was crying. "I'm coming over," she said. "I'm leaving right now." I hung up. I called John. It was dawn in the United Kingdom, but he answered. I told him the same thing. "Dad, did you call the police?" "Not yet." "Do it. Now. I'm taking the first flight." I hung up. And then, with my hands still trembling, I dialed the police number. "I need to report a kidnapping," I said when they answered. "It's my mother. My son took her." I went to the police station. An inspector met with me. Her badge said Monica, Montserrat, Hill, Villar. She was a woman in her 50s, with short hair and a serious look. I told her everything. I showed her the video. She watched it in silence. When it finished, she looked at me. "Mr. Robert, this is serious. We will open an investigation immediately." We filled out papers. I answered questions. I gave descriptions, phone numbers, addresses. The inspector assured me they would do everything possible to find her. "But I need you to give me 48 hours, she told me, "to track, to investigate." I nodded. But 48 hours seemed like an eternity to me. I left the police station feeling an emptiness in my chest. What was happening to my mother right now? Was she scared? Was she okay? Did she know I was looking for her? I went back home. Grace arrived that night. She got out of the car running and hugged me. "Dad," she said, crying into my shoulder, "how could you hide all this from me?" I had no answers. I just hugged her. We sat in the living room. I showed her the video again. I watched her face transform, from sadness to anger. I'm going to kill him, she said. I'm going to kill George. I shook my head. The police will handle it. But inside, I wanted to kill him too. That night, Grace and I stayed awake. We talked about everything, how we didn't see the signs, how George changed over the years, how Eve always defended him, and that blinded us, and how now we had to save everything. The next day, Inspector Hill called me. Mr. Robert, we tracked Tiffany's cell phone. We have a location, a house on the outskirts. We are heading there with a warrant. I'll keep you informed. I hung up. Grace looked at me. What did she say? They found her. I think they found her. We got in the car. We followed the police. We arrived at an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city, but when the police went in, the house was empty. Empty. No one was there. Not my mother, not George, not Tiffany, not Tony, just old furniture and dust. The inspector came out, frustrated. They fooled us. They left false clues. I sat on the curb. Grace sat next to me. And in that moment, I thought I had lost her forever, that my mother was going to die somewhere dark, and I would never know where. Until my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, and I heard her voice. Robert, it's me, your mother. Mum! My voice came out as a strangled cry. On the other side of the line, I heard her ragged breathing. Robert, my son. Her voice was barely a whisper, weak, scared. But it was her. It was my mother. I got up from the curb where I was sitting. Grace looked at me with wide eyes. Is it her? She asked. I nodded with the phone pressed to my ear. Mum, where are you? Are you okay? I heard background noise, like wind, or maybe traffic. No, I don't know where I am, she said. Her voice was trembling. I managed to get out. A lady helped me. She lent me her phone. I felt my heart was going to explode. What lady? Where is she? Her name is Linda. Belinda. She says she lives near where they kept me. Inspector Hill was next to me. I signaled to her. She approached quickly. It's my mother, I told her. Hill grabbed her radio. I need to track this call. Now. I went back to the phone. Mum, stay where you are. I'm coming to get you. Can you tell me what you see around you? I heard my mother breathing with difficulty. There's a store, a grocery store. It's called Pete's Corner, El Rincón de Don Pedro. Hill was already typing on her cell phone. I found it, she said. It's 20 minutes from here. I grabbed Grace's arm. We found her. My daughter started to cry, but they were tears of relief, of hope. Hill called for backup. In less than 2 minutes, there were 3 patrol cars ready. Let's go, she told me. We got in the car. During the drive, I didn't let go of the phone. I kept talking to my mother. Mum, I'm coming. Hold on. Don't hang up. She was coughing on the other side. Robert, I'm cold. I felt my heart rake. I'm coming, Mum. I'm coming. Grace was driving. She was fast. Too fast. But I didn't tell her to slow down. I wanted to get there too. The patrol cars were ahead of us, with their sirens on. The cell phone crackled. Mum? Silence. Mum? More silence. And then I heard another voice, an older woman's voice. Hello? Are you the lady's son? Yes, I said, almost shouting. I'm Robert. I'm Linda. Your mother is very weak. I took her to my house. She's lying down. What is your address? Linda gave me the address. It was 2 blocks from the store. We arrived in 15 minutes. Linda's house was small, painted yellow, with a garden full of flowers. I got out of the car before Grace fully braked. I ran to the door. I knocked. Linda opened it. She was a woman in her 60s, with grey hair pulled back in a bun. Come in, she told me. I entered, and there she was, my mother, lying on an old sofa, covered with a knitted blanket. Her eyes were closed. Her face was pale, paler than I had ever seen it. I knelt beside her. Mom, I whispered. She opened her eyes slowly. When she saw me, a tear rolled down her cheek. Robert, you came? I grabbed her hand. It was freezing. Of course I came, Mum. I was always going to come. Inspector Hill came in with a paramedic. We need to examine her, she said. The paramedic knelt next to me. He checked her vital signs. She's dehydrated and has mild hypothermia. She needs to go to the hospital. I nodded, but before they took her away, my mother grabbed my arm. Robert, the house. You need to find the house. I frowned. What house, Mum? Where they kept me. It has a basement. A secret basement. That's where they locked me up. Hill came closer. Mum, can you tell us where that house is? My mother closed her eyes, trying to remember. I don't know the address, but it's close. Linda found me 2 blocks away. I ran as fast as I could until I found her house. Linda intervened. There's an abandoned house around here. A big house with boarded-up windows. It's been empty for years. Hill called her officers. Search for that house, now. They left. The paramedic loaded my mother onto a stretcher. They put her in the ambulance. Grace got in with her. I'm going with Grandma, she told me. You go with the police. I hesitated, but my mother looked at me from the stretcher. Go, my son. Find your son and bring him to justice. Those words gave me strength. I nodded. The ambulance left, and I got into Hill's car. We're going to find them, she told me. I promise you. And I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was going to end well. But something in my chest told me the worst was yet to come. We found the house in 10 minutes. Linda was right. It was a big, old house with boarded-up windows and an overgrown yard. It looked like something out of a horror movie. The patrol cars surrounded the place. Hill got out of the car with her weapon drawn. Stay here, she told me. But I got out too. It's my family, I told her. I'm going with you. She hesitated, but she nodded. We walked toward the front door. One of the officers kicked it. It opened with a creak. We went in. The house smelled of dampness and abandonment. There was dust-covered furniture, cobwebs in the corners. Police, Hill shouted. Come out with your hands up. Silence. We walked slowly, checking every room. Nothing. The house seemed empty, and then one of the officers shouted from the back. Inspector, there's a door here. We ran to where the officer was. There was a wooden door in the floor, a trap door, hidden under an old, ragged rug. Hill opened it carefully. There were stairs leading down into absolute darkness. Turn on your flashlight, she told one of the officers. The light illuminated the stairs. They were made of rotten wood. They creaked with every step. We went down slowly. The air was thick, freezing, hard to breathe. It smelled of dampness, mold, urine, fear, confinement, of that smell that places where people suffer have. Water was dripping down the walls. There were dark stains on the floor that I didn't want to identify. We reached the bottom. It was a small, narrow basement, with bare concrete walls and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling that flickered. And there, in a corner, slumped over a broken plastic chair, was Tony, tied up with ropes, his face dirty, his eyes blindfolded, trembling. Hill approached him and took off the blindfold. Tony blinked, disoriented. When he saw the weapons, he started to shake. "Don't shoot," he said. "I was just doing what they paid me to do." Hill untied him. "Where are the others?" Tony pointed toward a door at the back of the basement. "They hid there when they heard the sirens." Hill and the officers walked toward the door. They kicked it open. And there they were, George, Tiffany, and Ethan, the three of them cornered in an even smaller room. George had a cell phone in his hand. He was trying to make a call. When he saw us, he dropped the phone. Tiffany was sitting on the floor, crying. And Ethan, my Ethan, had his face in his hands. "Hands up!" Hill shouted. "All of you!" The three obeyed. The officers handcuffed them, and I was left standing there, looking at my son, handcuffed like a criminal, because that's what he was, a criminal. We all went back up to the house. Outside, there were more patrol cars now. Neighbors had gathered, watching from their windows and yards. They put George, Tiffany, Ethan, and Tony in separate patrol cars. I stood in the street, watching them take my sons away. Ethan was crying. He looked at me through the patrol car window. "I'm sorry, Dad," he shouted. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. George, on the other hand, showed no emotion. He just stared ahead, his jaw clenched. Hill approached me. "I'm sorry, Robert," she told me. "I know this isn't easy." I nodded. "Can I go see my mother?" "Of course, I'll take care of the rest." I got in my car, but before starting the engine, I looked at the house one last time. And I thought about everything my mother had experienced there, the fear, the loneliness, and I swore I was going to make them pay. On the way to the hospital, my phone rang. It was John. "Dad, Grace told me. Is it true? They found Grandma." "Yes, son. We found her." I heard John let out a breath. "Thank God. I'm at the airport. I arrive in 8 hours. We'll wait for you there." I hung up. And for the first time in days, I felt something akin to peace. But it was a bitter peace. Because yes, I had found my mother, but I had lost my sons. One as a criminal, the other as an accomplice. And although Grace and John were with me, the family that Eve had built with so much love was broken, and I didn't know if it could ever be put back together. I arrived at the hospital. I parked. And before getting out, I allowed myself to cry. I cried for everything, for my mother, for my sons, for Eve, and for myself, for having believed that I could save everyone, until I heard her voice. I ran into the hospital. I asked at the reception desk. "Gertrude Miller," I said, almost out of breath. The receptionist typed on her computer. "Room 212, second floor." I went up the stairs. I didn't want to wait for the elevator. I reached the room. The door was ajar. I pushed it open gently. And there was my mother, lying in the hospital bed, with an IV in her arm and a blanket up to her neck. Grace was sitting next to her, holding her hand. When she saw me, Grace smiled. "She's stable," she told me. "The doctor said she's going to be fine." I walked over to the bed. My mother had her eyes closed, but she was breathing calmly. I sat on the other side and grabbed her other hand. And there we stayed, the three of us, in silence. My mother opened her eyes half an hour later. She looked at me. Then she looked at Grace. And she smiled. a weak smile, but real. "My children," she said in a hoarse voice. "You were here. I knew you would come." I felt a lump in my throat. "Mum, I'm sorry. Sorry for not taking better care of you." She shook her head. "You took care of me, Robert. You always did." Grace stroked her hair. "Grandma, what did they do to you?" My mother closed her eyes. I saw her face darken. "They locked me up, in a basement, without light, without hot water. George came every day. He brought me food, but only if I signed papers." I squeezed her hand. "Did you sign anything?" She shook her head. "No, I pretended I was confused, that I didn't understand. And he got angry, but I didn't sign anything." She took a deep breath, as if just remembering it hurt her. "There were moments, Robert, when I thought I was going to go crazy. Down there, in that cold basement, without knowing if it was day or night. I started talking to myself. I talked to your father. I would tell him, 'Honey, can you see me from where you are? Our grandson has me locked up like an animal, but I won't break. I won't give him that satisfaction.' And then I talked to you, Robert. I would tell you, 'My son, I know you're looking for me. I know you haven't forgotten me. Hold on, Mum. Hold on a little longer.' I held on to those thoughts as if they were a rope, because if I stopped believing, if I stopped resisting, then he would win. And I wasn't going to let him win. 92 years of life, Robert. 92 years of fighting, and I wasn't going to give up there." Grace got up. "I'm going to find the doctor. I need to know when she can go home." She left the room. I was left alone with my mother. She looked at me intently. "Robert, there's something you need to know." I leaned toward her. "What, Mum?" She took a deep breath. "I had a box. A wooden box that I've been keeping for years. Your son looked for it. He rummaged through all my things, but he never found it." I frowned. What was in that box? My mother smiled, a sad smile. "The truth. A letter from my mother, your grandmother. She wrote that the inheritance would only be valid if I was in full freedom. If someone forced me to sign, everything would be annulled." I felt a chill. Did George know that? No. And that's why I'm alive. Because if I had signed, maybe he wouldn't have let me go. The doctor entered shortly after. He was a young man with round glasses and an impeccable white coat. "Mr. Robert," he told me, looking at me with that seriousness that doctors have when they know you're on the verge of collapse. "Your mother is out of danger, but she needs to stay admitted for 2 or 3 days for observation. What she went through didn't just affect her body, it also affected her mind. She will need time." I nodded without being able to speak. "Thank you, doctor." He put a hand on my shoulder. "You should rest too. You look like you haven't slept in days." And he left. Grace came back with coffee. We sat by the bed, and we waited. The next day, Inspector Hill came to the hospital. She brought papers. "Mrs. Gertrude," she said, approaching the bed, "I need you to tell me everything that happened from the beginning." And my mother told. She told how George took her out of the house in the middle of the night, how they took her to that house, how they locked her in the basement, how Tiffany threatened her, how Tony watched her, and how Ethan, my Ethan, was there the first day, helping. Hill took notes. When my mother finished, Hill closed her notebook. "This is enough to charge them with unlawful confinement, extortion, and threats." 3 days later, there was a hearing. I didn't want to go, but Hill told me it was important. "Your presence can help," she told me. So I went. Grace came with me. John had arrived from the United Kingdom. The three of us entered the courtroom. It was a cold place, with white walls and wooden benches. We sat in the front row, and then they brought them in. George came in first, handcuffed, in a wrinkled suit and unshaven beard. Then Tiffany, then Ethan, and finally Tony. The four of them sat in the defendant's box. George looked at me. I held his gaze. I wasn't going to be the one to look away first. The judge entered. "All rise," the bailiff said. We stood up, and the hearing began. I listened to the accusations: unlawful confinement, extortion, threats, attempted fraud. Every word was a blow. But I didn't take my eyes off George. I wanted him to know I was there, that I was going to watch him fall. The prosecutor asked if anyone wanted to testify. I stood up. "I do," I said. The judge nodded. I walked up to the stand. I swore to tell the truth. And then I spoke. I spoke about my mother, about her fragility, how George had manipulated everything, how he had lied, how he had broken our family. When I finished, I returned to my seat. My hands were shaking. Grace grabbed my arm. "You did well, Dad," she whispered to me. But I didn't feel well. I felt empty. After the hearing, I went out into the hallway. I needed air. And then I saw him, Ethan. He was sitting on a bench with his hands cuffed in front of him. He was crying. I walked over. I sat down next to him. He looked up. "Dad," he said with a broken voice. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I looked at him. My son, the one who had always been weak, the one who always followed others. "Why, Ethan?" I asked him. "Why did you do it?" He shook his head. "I don't know, Dad. George convinced me. He said it was for everyone's good, that Grandma would be better off, that you couldn't take care of her. And I believed him." I felt anger, but also pity. "Ethan, what you did has consequences." He nodded. "I know, and I'm going to pay for it. But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt Grandma. Never." I got up. "You'll have to tell her that, not me." I went back to the courtroom. They were about to bring George in for questioning. They brought him in. They sat him in a chair in front of the judge. The prosecutor started asking questions. But George didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. "Mr. George Miller," the prosecutor said. She said, "Do you have anything to say?" George didn't answer. The judge struck his gavel. "Mr. Miller, I order you to respond." And then George spoke. "I have nothing to say, except that this is a misunderstanding." The prosecutor frowned. "A misunderstanding?" George nodded. "I was just taking care of my grandmother. My father is old. He can't do it." I felt my blood boil. I stood up. "Liar!" I shouted. The judge struck his gavel. "Order!" But I didn't shut up. "You kidnapped her. You locked her up. And now you say you were taking care of her." George looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Contempt. I walked up to the railing. An officer tried to stop me, but Grace held him back. "Let him," she told him. I stood in front of George. We were face to face, separated only by a railing. "Why?" I asked him. My voice was trembling. "Why did you do it?" George looked at me without blinking. And then he said the words that destroyed me. "Because she had what I needed, and you were never going to understand." I felt the world stop. "Money?" I asked. "All this was for money." George shrugged. Not just money, also properties, stocks, things she kept and never used. I had debts. I needed that. I shook my head. She's your grandmother. And you're my father, George replied. So what? Blood means nothing when your life is ruined. I backed away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man, standing in front of me, handcuffed, with a harsh face and a cold voice, was no longer my son. He was a stranger with my blood, but nothing more. Grace walked over. "Dad, let's go," she told me. But I couldn't move. I kept looking at George. "You know what's the worst part?" I told him. "Your mother defended you until the last day of her life, and you didn't even make it to her funeral on time." George didn't respond. He just looked away. And in that moment, I knew. I knew I had lost him forever. That the son I had raised, the one I had carried in my arms, had disappeared years ago. And this man, this criminal, was all that was left. The judge ordered pre-trial detention for all four, George and Tony without bail, Tiffany and Ethan with high bail. We left the courthouse. Outside, the sun was shining. Life went on as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. John hugged me. "Dad, I'm so sorry," he told me. I nodded. I had no words. We got in the car. We went back to the hospital. My mother was awake when we arrived. She smiled when she saw us. "How was it?" she asked. I sat next to her. "George is going to pay for what he did." She nodded. "Good." And then she grabbed my hand and whispered, "I knew you would come, Robert. I always knew it." And in that moment, with her hand in mine, I felt that all the pain, all the anger, all the fear was worth it. Because I had saved her. And that was the only thing that mattered. A week later, the doctor said my mother could go home. But before signing the discharge papers, Inspector Hill came to the hospital. She brought a box of evidence. "Mrs. Gertrude," she said, sitting next to the bed, "we found this in the house where they kept you. We believe it's yours." She opened the box. Inside was my mother's clothes, her rosary, her glasses, and something else. A small wooden box, antique, hand-carved. My mother saw it, and her eyes lit up. "My box," she whispered. "I thought I had lost it." Hill handed it to her. My mother took it with trembling hands. She opened it slowly, and inside, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was a letter, yellowed, with old handwriting. "What is that, Mum?" I asked her. She looked at me. "Salvation. This letter was written by my mother, your grandmother, more than 50 years ago, when she received Uncle Stephen's inheritance." I moved closer. "What does it say?" My mother unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. Her voice trembled, but it was firm. "I, Mary Maria Miller, del Carmen Arostegui, declare that the inheritance received from my brother Stephen will only be valid for my daughter Gertrude if she is in full freedom and in full possession of her mental faculties. Any document signed under coercion, threat, or deception will be considered null. This is my last will." Silence. Hill raised her eyebrows. "Is that a legal document?" My mother nodded. "It's registered at the notary's office 53 years ago." I felt something break inside me, but it wasn't pain, it was relief. "Mum, that means—" She nodded. "That everything George did was in vain. Even if I had signed, it would be worthless. The inheritance would never have reached him." Grace, who was next to the window, approached. "Grandma, did George know this?" My mother shook her head. No, I never told him. I never told anyone, except the family lawyer, Mr. Armando, but he died years ago. Hill took notes. This changes everything. With this document, we can add attempted fraud to the charges. My mother closed the box. Robert, she said, looking at me intently, I knew George was going to try something. That's why I kept this box as if it were my life, because it was. 2 days later, there was another hearing. This time, the prosecutor presented the letter as evidence. The judge read it in silence. Then he looked at George. Mr. Miller, were you aware of the existence of this document? George didn't answer. His lawyer, Mr. Salazar, stood up. He was a heavy man, with a moustache and an expensive suit. Your Honor, my client had no knowledge of that document. Therefore, he cannot be charged with fraud. The prosecutor smiled. No knowledge? Then why did he try to get Mrs. Gertrude to sign property transfer documents without the presence of a public notary? Salazar stammered. That is... The judge struck his gavel. Mr. Salazar, did you advise your client in this process? Salazar turned pale. I just... Answer yes or no. Silence. And then Salazar bowed his head. Yes. The judge ordered the immediate arrest of Salazar for complicity in attempted fraud and advising to commit a crime. 2 officers approached Salazar. He raised his hands. Wait, I can explain. But no one listened to him. They took him away in handcuffs. George watched him leave, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, because now he was alone, without a lawyer, without accomplices who could save him. The prosecutor continued. Furthermore, we have discovered something else. He opened a folder. Mrs. Gertrude donated a significant portion of her inheritance to charities 10 years ago. Here are the documents. Hospitals, orphanages, churches. In total, 80% el 80% of the inheritance has already been distributed. I looked at my mother, surprised. She smiled. I did it because I wanted to, she said. Because you don't take money to the grave with you. The prosecutor showed the papers to the judge, which means that Mr. George Miller's entire plan was for an inheritance that practically no longer exists. There are only some minor properties and a modest savings account left. George suddenly stood up. That can't be. His voice echoed in the room. She has millions, I know it. The judge struck his gavel. Order. Mr. Miller, sit down. But George didn't sit down. My grandmother lied to me. She tricked me. I stood up too. No, you tricked yourself. You thought there was a treasure and you destroyed your family for nothing. George looked at me with pure hatred. You convinced her. You told her to donate everything so I wouldn't have anything. I shook my head. I didn't know anything about that, but I'm glad, because you don't deserve anything. After the hearing, my mother asked to speak with me alone. We sat on a bench outside the courthouse. She grabbed my hand. Robert, you need to understand something, she told me. When I was locked up in that basement, I thought I was going to die. I squeezed her hand. Mum, don't say that. She continued. I spent 3 days there, 3 days in the dark. George came down once a day. He brought me a plate of cold food and a glass of water. He would tell me, Grandma, just sign, and all this will end. But I didn't sign. Not because I knew about my mother's document, but because I knew that if I signed, he wouldn't need me anymore. And then what was he going to do to me? Her voice cracked. I saw tears in her eyes. I was so scared, Robert. so scared. I hugged her. I felt her small, fragile body tremble against mine. "But do you know what kept me alive?" she asked me. "Thinking about you. Thinking that you were looking for me, that you hadn't forgotten me." I felt my heart break. "I would never forget you, Mum. Never." She pulled away and looked at me intently. In those days of darkness, I talked to myself. A lot. I recited things my mother taught me as a child. I prayed the rosary without having it in my hands. And I talked as if your father was sitting next to me on that cold concrete floor. I would tell him, "Honey, our grandson got lost in ambition, but our son didn't. Our son is going to find me because he has your kindness, your heart, your integrity. And when he finds me, he'll know it was worth it." I also talked to your grandmother, my mother. I would tell her, "Mum, thank you for writing that letter. Thank you for protecting me even after you're gone, because that letter is the only thing keeping me alive down here." I couldn't hold back the tears. "Mum." She wiped my tears with her wrinkled hand, with that tenderness that only mothers have. "And you were right, my son. You found me, and now everything is fine." But I knew not everything was fine, because I had lost 2 sons in the process, and that was never going to be fine. That night, at home, my mother called me to her room. She was sitting on the bed with the wooden box on her lap. "I want you to have this," she told me. I shook my head. "Mum, that's yours," she insisted. "Robert, I'm 92 years old. I don't know how much time I have left. I want you to keep this, so that when I'm gone, you'll know that I always protected you." I took the box. I opened it. Inside, besides the letter, there were old photos. Photos of my father, my grandparents, us when we were children. "This box holds all our history," my mother told me. "Keep it safe." I closed the box and pressed it against my chest. "I will, Mum. I promise you." She smiled, and in that moment, I felt that everything had been worth it, because I had her with me, alive, safe. A week later, the judge passed sentence. George, 8 years in prison. Tiffany, 5 years. Tony, 6 years. Ethan, 3 years. With possibility of reduction for cooperation. When I read the sentence in the newspaper, I didn't feel joy, just emptiness. Grace hugged me. "Dad, this is justice." I nodded. But justice didn't bring back my family. Justice didn't erase the pain. John, who had extended his stay, put his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, you did the right thing." "I know," I said, "but it doesn't feel good." My mother, who was sitting in her chair next to the window, spoke. "Robert, justice never feels good when it's against your own blood. But it was necessary because there are things worse than losing a son, and one of them is losing your dignity." That night, before sleeping, I thought about everything that had happened. How my life had changed in a matter of weeks. How I had lost 2 sons, but saved my mother. How the family Eve had built was broken, but had also been rebuilt in a different way. Grace was living with me now. John visited more. And my mother was alive and strong. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully, because I understood something. I understood that my mother had saved me even from her confinement, with her cunning, with her strength, with that wooden box she kept her whole life. She always knew. She was always one step ahead. And I, who thought I was taking care of her, discovered that she was the one taking care of me. My mother returned home 2 weeks after the sentencing. When I helped her out of the car and through the front door, she stopped at the threshold. She closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. "It smells like home," she said. I smiled. Grace had prepared everything. She had cleaned the house, changed the sheets, put fresh flowers in every room. The house smelled of lavender and freshly baked cookies, pan recién horneado. My mother walked slowly to the living room. She sat in her chair, the same one she had been sitting in thousands of times before. "This is where I belong," she said. "Not in a basement, not in a hospital. Here." I knelt beside her. "And here you are going to stay. Forever." She stroked my cheek. "I know, my son. I know." The following days were about healing. Grace had officially moved back in. She quit her job in the other city and got one here. "I want to be close to you," she told me. "I've lost too much time away." John visited every weekend. He brought pizza, comida italiana, wine, stories from his life abroad. The house, which had been so empty and silent after Eve's death, was alive again. One Sunday, as we were having lunch all together, my mother raised her glass of water. "I want to make a toast," she said. We all fell silent. "To family, the real one, the one that stays when everything falls apart." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months, I felt whole. Almost whole. 2 months after the sentencing, I received a letter. It came from the prison. The sender was Ethan. I opened it with trembling hands. Grace was with me. "What does it say?" she asked. I read aloud. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I know what I did is unforgivable. But I need you to know that a day hasn't gone by that I haven't regretted it. I was weak. I let George convince me of something horrible, and now I'm paying for it. But what hurts me the most is not being here. It's knowing that I let you down. You, Grandma, Mum. If I could go back in time, I would do everything differently. I love you, Dad, and I hope someday I can look you in the eye again. Ethan." I folded the letter. I felt a lump in my throat. Grace looked at me. "Are you going to go see him?" I didn't know. Not yet. One afternoon, Father Andrew came to visit us. He brought a bottle of wine and a Bible. "I've come to pray with you," he said. We sat in the living room, my mother, Grace, John, the priest, and I. Andrew read a passage about forgiveness, about how forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, but letting go of the burden. When he finished, he looked at my mother. "Mrs. Gertrude, how do you feel?" She smiled. "I feel free, Father, for the first time, in a long time." Andrew nodded. "And you, Robert?" I looked at my hands. "I don't know, Father. Not yet." He put his hand on my shoulder. "Forgiveness takes time. Don't rush it. When you're ready, it will come." But I wasn't sure if I would ever be ready to forgive George. Ethan, maybe. But George, no. One night, my mother asked me to sit in the backyard. It was cold, but she insisted. We wrapped ourselves in blankets and sat on the old plastic chairs. "Robert," she said, looking at the stars, "did I ever tell you how I met your father?" I smiled. "1,000 times, Mum." She laughed. "Well, I'm going to tell you again." And she told me. The story of how they met at a carnival, how he asked her to dance, how they fell in love. I had heard it so many times, but that night was different, because after everything we had been through, that story was no longer just a story. It was a reminder that true love exists, and that it's worth fighting for. When she finished her story, my mother looked at me. "I took care of you as a child," she said. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I changed your diapers. I fed you. I taught you to walk. And now you took care of me when I was old. You saved me, you protected me. My eyes filled with tears. Mum, I just... She raised her hand. Let me finish. The rest, Robert. Time will put it in its place. George will pay his debt. Ethan will find his way. But you and I, we already won, because we are still together. I grabbed her hand. I'm always going to be with you, Mum. She squeezed my hand. I know, my son. I know. And we stayed there, sitting under the stars, in silence. A silence that was no longer heavy. It was peace. In time, I started visiting Ethan in prison. It wasn't easy. The first visits were awkward. He cried. I didn't know what to say, but little by little we started rebuilding something. It wasn't the same as before. It never would be, but it was something. Ethan told me how George had manipulated him, how he had painted a picture of a better future if they just helped Grandma. He convinced me that we were saving her from you, Ethan told me one afternoon. He said you were neglecting her, and I believed him because I've always been weak, Dad. I've always followed others. I sighed. Ethan, we all make mistakes, but the important thing is how we fix them. He nodded. I'm going to fix it, Dad. I don't know how, but I will. George, on the other hand, never asked for forgiveness. He never showed remorse. I visited him once, just once. It was 6 months after his sentencing. I entered the visiting room. He was sitting on the other side of a glass partition. I picked up the phone. He picked up his. We looked at each other. What do you want? He asked me. His voice was cold. I took a deep breath. I wanted to see if there was anything left of the son I raised. He smiled. A bitter smile. That son died a long time ago, Dad, when you realized I wasn't perfect. I shook my head. You weren't perfect, but you were my son, and I loved you. And now? I stared at him. Now I don't know who you are. He hung up the phone, got up, and left. I stayed there, watching him disappear through the door, and I knew I had lost him forever. Life continued. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. My mother regained her strength. She started cooking again, taking care of the garden, laughing. One afternoon, while we were preparing dinner together, she said to me, "Do you know what I learned from all of this?" I stopped chopping onions. What, Mum? She looked at me. That family isn't blood. Family is who stays when everything falls apart. John flew from the United Kingdom without hesitation. Grace left her life to be here. You fought against your own son to save me. That is family. I nodded. Eve always said that. My mother smiled. Eve was wise, wiser than all of us. And we continued cooking, in silence. But it was a comfortable silence, a silence of home. A year later, Ethan was released on parole. He came home. He knocked on the door. I opened it. We looked at each other. His eyes were red. Dad, he said, I came to ask Grandma for forgiveness. I let him pass. My mother was in the living room. When she saw Ethan, she stood up. He knelt in front of her. Grandma, I'm sorry. Sorry for everything. My mother looked at him, and then she did something I didn't expect. She hugged him. You are forgiven, my son, she told him. But don't forget, because scars remind us of who we don't want to be. Ethan cried in her arms, and I, watching that scene, understood what my mother had said. Family is who stays, and Ethan, despite everything, had stayed. George hadn't. Today, at 74 years old, I look back and I understand. I understand that pain teaches us more than happiness, that losing a son to his own actions hurts, but not as much as losing my dignity. My mother is still here, with me, stronger than ever. Grace lives in the room next door. John visits every month. Ethan comes for Sunday dinner, still carrying his guilt, but trying to be better. And George chose his path. I chose mine. And I learned that true love doesn't betray. It stays, even if it hurts. Even if everything falls apart, it stays. And that, in the end, is the only thing that matters. And today I understand that family is not chosen by blood. It is chosen by who stays when everything falls apart. My mother taught me that, and I will never forget it. And you? Has someone in your own family ever betrayed you? How did you overcome it? Tell us in the comments. If this story touched your heart, leave me your like and subscribe. Every day, I share true stories that could be yours. Your comment gives me strength to continue. Thank you for being here, for listening until the end. See you in the next story.